Yo, 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 what's going on? A little more somber of a video. Um, as you saw in the title, this is going to be um, the official closing of God's chosen ones, as hard as that is for me to say. But at the same time, I'm also want to tell the story. I've never really told the story start to finish. But today's going to be the day. So I want to have this out there. It's just something that I could put out there, something that's going to outlive me, that tells the story of God's chosen ones. November 18th, 2018, that was the day that I launched God's chosen ones officially. It was a home for the lost, the broken, the forgotten. We stood for second chances, for the addict, the homeless, the veteran, the man. Really, anyone that just wanted to rebuild their lives, they were welcome to come. Here we are 7 years later, and on November 18th, 2025, that chapter officially comes to an end. And, this isn't just about the closing of an organization. This is about closing a chapter of my life, and finding peace and moving forward, because I was God's chosen ones. That was my identity. And, when things came to an end, I lost a part of myself there too, what got the inspiration, a lot of the inspiration for me to get into this was that, I wanted to get away from what I thought was the average life. I wanted to get away from just working a job. I didn't want to work for someone. But this journey really taught me the value of just being a regular person. If you're friends with me on Facebook, you'll see I say just stay average. We have a segment. We use that too. We say just stay average, man, because there's a lot of joy there. We try to, we have these dreams of grandeur, and we try to reach out and we reach out for these things, and you'll find that you lose so much along the way. But just being a person that just works for their money, they go to work, they spend time with their family, you can't buy that. Enjoying the things that money can't buy. This journey taught me the value of just being a regular person. There was a time when, as a young man, I resented my parents because they were just regular people, so, but now I realize what I had, but, first I just want to start by saying thank you to everybody that supported us, that believed in us, whether you gave us money, your time, even if you just had a good thought about us, you really played a part in our mission and our vision. And I just want to acknowledge that because we helped a lot of people. We impacted a lot of people. People got housed, stories got changed. God's chosen ones was created to give people a real shot at recovery, at dignity, and at a new life, But, I got to start from the beginning because as everything got started, I was about to get married. I was in a relationship, but the relationship was going kind of down because, she was a good woman, but she had been traumatized by what happened with her daughter. She had a daughter that was really troubled and ended up going through the system, and it just affected our relationship. I ended up on my own. I ran into a Mr. Brandon Flood. I did a tribute to him. Go check that out on my page. I did a tribute to him, and he really was inspirational, or I would say he was the key to it all. Like when I met Mr. Brandon Flood, first let me tell you, Mr. Brandon Flood helped people get their records clear. You know, he was the one that helped make the decision. He was the secretary of the PA Pardons Board. You know, and he would help make a decision of whether you get a pardon from the governor. And he left that safe role, getting paid good money, government position, good benefits, to start his own firm to help ex-offenders get their records cleared. And I got the chance to meet this brother, and when I met him, he opened me up to a world that I never had even imagined before. You know, like he asked a question, and he said, you know, because I have a criminal record, I'm being transparent. But he said, well, what if you didn't have a record? And I know that seems like a basic question, but that question changed my whole life because it was something I never had even considered before. I've had a record since I was 16. It was something I never even considered before. You know, he showed me that it was possible, that this was possible. This branched into all kinds of other things, eventually become God's chosen ones, but I'd also get into school and all kinds of things happened because of me meeting this man. And unfortunately, not too long ago, he passed away. And it really gave me as he inspired me to get into God's chosen ones, he's also inspiring me to close this chapter and, you know, move on with the rest of my life. You know, in 2018, when we first started, you know, I was in somebody's attic. But every day after work, I would get off work. I would get on the computer. I'd put everything together. I had all my paperwork set. But it was a real grind. You know, like I said, I just split up with a woman that I thought I was going to be married to. And, you know, I was just a working man. And I wish I would have known at that time how valuable that was, because I had a good job at that time. I was doing good. My credit was going up. But I just had this vision that I could help these people, I could help people. And so I launched God's Chosen Ones, and I didn't have a building. I didn't have a facility. I used my house. I did like the Bible tells us. I brought people into my house. And that's what separated me from a lot of the people that I would work with, is that, I brought people into my house. Most people, they manage a facility and go home. I lived with these guys. So we would open up, we would launch, we would open up, we would start reaching out to different facilities, prisons, recovery centers, VA, and we would start accepting people in, There's so many people I could think of, but one person in particular, he's living down in Florida right now, living his best life, and I'm not going to say it's because he came to God's chosen ones. That's not my point. My point is that is if a person is given a real shot, they can make it. Unfortunately, that doesn't guarantee success, but it is a requirement for it. As we're moving along, getting everything set up, the whole world stopped. COVID-19 pandemic will happen 2020, right as we're finally just got a property. We got a better property, bigger, more rooms. We could house more people. That would lead into a second property. But once the COVID pandemic happened, it really choked off a lot of our resources, because we had a lot of business meetings set up with some organizations that wanted to help fund us. But once that happened, it was like the end of the world. Resources started drying up. But residents still needed housing. So we kept housing people. We kept going. The problem, more so than the problem became more so with the other organizations in the area. We went from being a promising organization to just trying to survive. We were different. We didn't turn people away because they didn't fit our criteria. They didn't necessarily have to believe the way we believed. As long as they wanted a better life and they wanted to change their life around, that was the only price of admission. What we found was a lot of these other places, you have to believe a certain way. You have to, you have to do things a certain way just to get in. And like I said before, well, I'll say this, there were organizations we dealt with Jubilee and another organization called U-Turn. And by the end of it, we were at odds with these organizations, and these were organizations that, talked about Jesus. Hold on, sorry about that. These were organizations that talked about Jesus. And it really caught us off guard because we started realizing that, and I really learned this in school. Like a lot of people ask me, what was your biggest lesson that you learned in school? And the biggest lesson I would say is that in statistics class, I started to see things differently. I started to see how everything is boiled down to percentages. The world that we live in, for us to be able to live the lives we live, to be able to have a house, go to work, do all the regular things, there has to be a certain percentage of people in prison. There has to be a certain percentage of people using drugs. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's the truth, because when you really look at it, if there's nobody going to prison, there's no cops, there's no lawyers, there's no judges, there's no, and we need that because that's become such an integral part of our ecosystem. And we need that now, and so when you look at an organization that's being ran like a business, you got to understand that they don't want 100% of people to go in and do well. Because when you look at it, that would be bad for business. So they want a certain percentage to do well, but they also want a certain percentage to fail. It's set up that way. Like when you take Jubilee, for example, right? And I haven't been in there for a while. Maybe things have changed, maybe, who knows? But when we were dealing with them, and I sat down with the CEO himself, and he opened my eyes to a lot of things because I didn't really understand the nature of business. That was my problem. I was in it for the ministry. But when you understand the nature of business, you understand that you are more concerned about profit when it comes to business. It's about dominating the market as well. Like you're not looking to really partner with people when it comes to business. And I didn't understand this, and the thing was like, when you take a place like Jubilee, they're a business, so it's like they need a certain amount of people to not make it. And I'll tell you how I mean. So they take a brother, let's say a brother's coming out of prison, they go into Jubilee. And Jubilee, they have thrift stores, kind of like a Goodwill. And these thrift stores, they have to work in there for 6 months. As they approach that 6 months, this is where the statistics come in. Now, the best thing for business ever is free labor or cheap labor. So the best thing for business, they're motivated by profit to keep these guys working in this Jubilee store. Now, after 6 months, they're supposed to be able to go out and get their own job. But if everybody does that, they lose their whole thing. So what they do is they make it statistically hard to get through. They take everything away. No cigarettes, no this, no that, no nothing. And then when the person eventually fails, they know statistically, some people gonna make it. But they already know that statistically, a certain percentage, we're gonna keep them flowing through this program. And how it works is like this. Say a guy gets caught smoking a cigarette. And he don't even have to get caught smoking a cigarette. They urine test for nicotine. So if the guy gets caught smoking a cigarette They're going to tell him, hey, you know what? You got to go back to day one, phase one. That means you go back to like when you first got here. Those time you just worked, that don't count. You start over. You know, if you get tough and you don't want to do it, okay, cool. They call you a PO. They take you back over to the county. You sit over there for 2 months. Then you come back. Then you're ready to come back at that point. And then they can just run you through that system again. But once they get you to the end of that 6 months, something will happen to where they got to knock you back down. And if you end up going back, getting violated and going back to jail, that time that you were out on the street working, that doesn't count now. And there's guys that get caught in that cycle for years, going back and forth, back and forth. But guess what? It's good for business though. So I started discovering all this, you know. When it comes to U-turn, I'll tell you a story. There was a guy named Paul, right? Paul, he had worked his way up through the program. They was getting ready to give him the keys to one of the big ministries that they have. I think it was like a food ministry or something like that. Paul is getting ready to basically be handed the keys. It's a big ministry they have. So the buildings involved and, you know, big responsibility. But the leader says, hey, we got to test this guy first. We got to make sure that he's going to be loyal to us. And this is what they did. They have a women's side of the program, right? The women's side, they get together and they start having them come together and do, you know, work together and things like that. Now, keep in mind, this is a religious program that they never have come together like this. They start coming together. The guy and the girl. Okay, so you have the guy Paul, right? You have him. He's the overseer. He's like he's worked his way up to like a supervisor, a leader, you know. And on the girl side, you have a woman over there that's done the same thing. So now they're at the same level. They're both overseers, you know, kind of like supervisors in a way. And they begin to keep bumping into each other. And they start feeling like, hey, we got feelings for each other. They approach the leadership and they say, hey, you know, we want to, you know, start dating, you know, and well, we want to do it right, though. We don't want to, you know, we want you guys to be in the lead, you know, lead us and instruct us. But the thing was, what they didn't realize is that they knew this was going to happen. They knew this was going to happen. So they okay this thing. And you got to know this program to really know how crazy this is, you know, where they'll punish you for looking at a woman, you know. So they're going to let these two date in this program. But again, you got to keep in mind, it's a statistical thing that they're looking at. Because they know that at some point in time, one second. At some point in time, something's going to happen in their life. Statistically, something's going to happen in their life that's going to tear this whole thing apart. And this is what happened. Something happened in the girl's life that made her want to go back to where she was from. A lot of people come from out of town, come to this program. She wants to go back. They tell her, well, hey, you could go back and check on things, but it's going to be day one, phase one. You ain't going to be an overseer no more. She's like, okay, whatever, I'm gone. She leaves, but she tells him, look, I'm not coming back. I'm just being real with you. I'm not coming back. Now the guy, he hears of this and he's devastated because she's left. He's now going to the leadership saying, can I go check on her? I'll be right back. And of course they're like, sure. But it's day one, phase one. And then, of course, that means he won't get the keys to the ministry and all that comes to an end. But if he stays, it's his. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know that he's being tested like this and being played with like this. So he goes, and this is where I kind of run into him at, and I'm trying to explain to him what's going on, and I'm trying to tell him, like, look, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this, man. Just stay, keep working your program. He wouldn't listen, man. He took off, went. The thing how I got involved was he didn't want to go back there. He wanted to instead come to my place instead of doing the day one, phase one, you know, because we had by this point, we had our own properties and things like that. So he goes, he meets up with her, and he finds out, she tells him, listen, man, I didn't really like you like that. I was just, you know, we're in a program. I'm just doing what I got to do to, you know, have a good time and not think about, you know, basically played him. So he's devastated. He comes back. He's back out in the street not too long after that. And I don't really know what happened to Paul. But the thing was that he was doing good. They didn't have to go through that whole, why was any of that necessary? But then they'll turn around and say, he was at fault because he left and he chose. And this was the stuff that, you know, I was naive to when I first started this. I didn't realize, you know, what we were up against. But once we started to uncover this and speak out about this, we basically became enemy number one. All the organizations stopped trying to help us. They would send people that they needed housed, but they had cut us off any kind of financial help. All the resources dried up. All the connections kind of faded out. And, you know, on top of that, I get the news that the owners of the properties, now they want to sell. But it goes against our agreement. We have a lease in place. And I could have fought it in court. People think like when you see somebody say, "Oh, I'm gonna sue them." Like, people say that, right? But to go to court, you really gotta have money. Like, you can't. It costs money to take somebody to court, even if you in the right. Now, if it's like you see these commercials where they take your case. If you get something, they'll take off the top, whatever. But that's only for certain situations. Like, that's not going to be just because you decided to sue somebody, you know. So I was faced with a dilemma. I could either fight them in court, or I could use the rest of what I had to help these guys get placed elsewhere. Because the guys that I still had living there with us, if they are without an address, it's a violation. And even if it's not their fault, if they don't have an address, they're going back to jail. So I took everything I had, you know, and I started looking at that. Now, I had one last effort. I want to show this. I had one last effort. Let me move over here. I had one last effort. Okay. And let me do this. One last chance that I had to really maybe save God's chosen ones. This was my last shot. I'm getting ready to tell you right here. And this is the time where, and I've talked about this before, but I'm going to show the article and everything. This is the time where I almost got sued by Mike Tyson. I know that sounds crazy. But let me do this here. I want to go over this too. So, like I said, let me pull this up right here. So let me before I get into this, let me give you the context. So, like I said, this is my last shot. Let me switch back over here real quick. This was my last shot to save this organization. I link up with a group called Five Stones. And I want to just put this out there. This isn't to say that the people at Five Stones are bad folks. I want to say that these are good people. They do a lot of good work. You know, they are still running their organization and doing all kinds of good work. You know, and I just want to put that out there because I don't want this story to give the wrong idea of that, because this is all spilled milk. This is nothing that I have any resentment about. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. I don't really think so, but I'll let you be the judge of that. So, as again, like I say, this was my last shot. So I link up with this group, Five Stones, and they're a good group. At the time, they ran a program where they would help after school, you know, kids after school program type of thing, where they would help them with their homework, kind of get to know them. And then they would put them in the gym. They start showing them MMA and getting them going that way. So they were like a fight camp, you know, but it had a faith-based component to it, because they would have like church in the gym, you know, they would say. And so I linked up with this group. I had heard of them, and I started to reach out to this group and you know, just, you know, kind of getting involved with what they're doing, just kind of following their pages and stuff like that. They approached me. I don't know how really, either they approached me or I heard about it, approached them, one of the two, but we got word that they were getting ready to put together a big boxing event. And this boxing event, okay, was supposed to be star-studded. So it was going to be like an amateur pro night. So you're going to have a lot of amateurs there and some pros, but you were also going to have the old legends in attendance. They were going to bring out Mike Tyson, Riddick Bowe, Vinny Paz, Bobby Seale, Mickey Ward. I can't even remember. There's a bunch of them, you know, but the main attraction, of course, is Mike Tyson. If you don't really follow boxing like that, all you're going to really care about is Mike Tyson. You know, if you follow boxing, then you appreciate Riddick Bowe and all these guys. You know what I'm saying? But the main point of all of this was that Mike Tyson was going to be there. That was the main selling point. So since Mike Tyson was going to be there, I reach out, or they reach out, whichever one happens first, whatever. But I wanted to be a sponsor. I wanted to get involved. I thought if I could get involved with this and I could get in front of Mike Tyson and show him what I'm doing, show him what what challenges we're having. Maybe they even not just to ask for money, not money. I'm saying maybe there's a connection. Maybe there's something, a hand I could shake that he could, you know. And so you got to imagine, I'm reaching for anything at this point. The writing's on the wall. Things are going bad right now for us. So I go to the church in the gym, Five Stones, right? And I am there. I have my sponsorship money. I'm ready to be a part of this thing. I go up to, at the end of service, I go up to the front of the gym or the church or whatever, you know, I go up to the front where the pastor's standing up there. And the pastor is the leader of this organization as well. And we're talking about everything. This guy, Alan, walks up. And as we're standing there, Alan says to me, "Hey, yo, I just got off the phone with Mike Tyson." Right. And then, you know, he's saying, you know, what they're talking about, stuff like that. And then he says something like, oh, and he had to, all of a sudden he had to get going. He couldn't talk long. And because we're standing up there at the pastor, I tell him, I kind of lean over and I'm kind of whispering like, oh, he probably had to go smoke, you know, because we all know Mike Tyson got his own weed and, you know, all of that. So I'm leaning over saying that, right? And he says back to me, oh, hey, yeah, I got like an ounce in the back. We can go back and, and we're kind of whispering back and forth. But the pastor heard him walk up and say, hey, I just got off the phone with Mike Tyson. And keep that in mind. That's going to be an important point as we get into this. This is all just a setup for the context. So you know what's happening here. As we get closer to the event, so I leave my money there. We go through. As we get closer to the event, I'm putting this everywhere. I'm selling tickets. I'm putting, I'm putting this on my website. I'm putting this on all my social medias. I'm telling everybody, tell everybody, Mike Tyson's coming, and of course, if Mike Tyson's coming, people won't want to be there. That's just what it is. As we're getting closer to the event, I get hit with a notification that Mike Tyson has posted on his Instagram account that he has nothing to do with this event. Now, I'm hoping there's got to be a mistake. And I'm going there and I see this message. I wish I could pull the original message. I wish I could screenshot it or something. Because it just dropped. It was like a drop kick to the chest. And Mike Tyson is on there talking about, we don't have nothing to do with this event. And as I'm reading, I can't believe this, but this is real. So I'm trying to get in touch with the Five Stones, like, hey, what's going on? Then Penn Live drops the article. Now watch this. Penn Live drops the article. Mike Tyson's not coming. Brighton's on the wall, right? Now let me read a little bit of this. Let me go to where. Okay, so check this out. So this is what he wrote. I remember it too. I know this is what he put on his Instagram too. If you follow along right here. Mr. Mike Tyson is not attending Fall Brawl in Palmyra, PA. That was the event. It was the Fall Brawl. It was in Palmyra, and has never discussed such attendance with anyone responsible for this event. All representations about my attendance are false. The first time he and his team were aware of this event was when press started to circulate. Mr. Tyson takes charity very seriously, and to misuse his name and likeness to willingly promote an event falsely misrepresenting his attendance to raise funds is irresponsible and unfair to patrons that have paid money expecting him to be there. His legal team is looking into this matter. Now, he put that on Facebook, and of course, Penn Live reaches out to, which you'll see right here, Five Stones, the CEO with Shane Manning. And he said that the gym's lawyer has turned over all the emails and contact information for the people who purported to be Tyson's intermediaries and with whom they had worked with to arrange Tyson's appearance at a planned Friday dinner and a Saturday 15-card amateur boxing event. Now, keep in mind that dinner, we were selling tickets to that. That was where I needed to be, because that's where you could just sit and talk with these guys. And that was going to be perfect for me to try to get some help with this. Now, Manny told Penn Live it turned out that the people the gym was working with to land Tyson did not actually represent him. We were scammed, Manny said Thursday morning. Unfortunately, I can't fix it. We don't want to lie to people. Now, that's the pastor that was standing up at the front of the church when this guy came up and said that he talked to Mike Tyson directly. Now, here's the issue with that. The problem with that is in this whole article, he didn't say, hey, the people, me and my sponsors didn't have nothing to do with this. He left it open-ended to where it could be assumed that our group was the one telling him this, because I was putting this all over the place. I was telling people, for sure he's coming. And so, he never came. And that was basically the nail in the coffin to GCO, the God's Chosen Ones, because once that event fell through, that was the last little bit of credibility I had was gone in that event. And maybe it was a misunderstanding somehow. But, I would sink into a deep depression after that. We would have to close our doors not too long after that. Sank into a deep depression. I was even homeless. And you got to remember, I was given a place to stay to homeless people, and how ironic it was that I would end up the one homeless. You know what I mean? But just like I once told others, recovery is possible, even from heartbreak, because I was heartbroken. But I did find new purpose, man. I was able to get a job working with the local EMS service. And so I was in a position where I could still help people and still be a source of positivity to somebody. Became a medical transport specialist. And also still in school. We jumped in school a while back, but I'm still in school. Should be graduating next year. I just realized, I'm not a businessman. I'm a minister. I'm in ministry, and ministry and business don't mix. It's like oil and water, because in business, you care about profit. In ministry, you care about the people. And one is going to take over. I appreciate being average today. Just a regular working person. I don't need to be the boss. I don't need to be, and most of you don't either. So as of November 18th, 2025, God's Chosen Ones will officially close. It's been 7 years, but I'm looking forward to starting a new chapter. Along with that, I'm going to be, cleaning up my Facebook. A lot of people on my Facebook are connected to my time at God's Chosen Ones, and I need to close that chapter. It's no diss to nobody. If you see me on the people you may know section and you see I unfriended you, just know that it's nothing personal. It's just I need to move on and move forward. And I want to focus on the people that I have in my life that, I'm going to be moving forward with. And like I said, it's no diss. It's no disrespect or anything like that. It's just, I want to move on from that, and I need to do that to heal. To everyone we couldn't reach, I believe in you. I still believe there's a chance for you. And to Brandon Flood, thank you for showing me that redemption is real. The doors may close, but the mission still lives on. And every person we helped and every lesson I learned, it was never about the building. It was always about the people. So there's a lot more I could put into that story. I'll probably maybe do a part 2, get into some more of that.